Ever since Black Frieza made his debut, the Dragon Ball community has been buzzing with discussion. There have been plenty of questions and concerns. Where did this power come from? How was Frieza suddenly this strong? And more importantly, does it really make sense? If you're new to the channel, make sure to like and subscribe as it helps more than you can imagine. If you're enjoying the content, it lets me know that you want to see more like this. Let's start with Dragon Ball Super Chapter 87, which I personally think was the highlight of the Granolah Arc. It wrapped things up nicely, resolving the immediate threat while leaving the story open-ended for what comes next. Sure, the Granolah Arc had its ups and downs, and I can completely understand why many fans felt it was a bit repetitive. There was a constant power struggle, back and forth battles where just when you think it's over, someone powers up again or gets revived and the cycle continues. As Vegeta put it was a pathetic victory. Still, when you take a step back and read through the entire arc in one go, the pacing actually feels more natural. I recently reread the whole thing and honestly I found myself enjoying it a lot more than I expected to. I think the main problem lies in the monthly release format. Having to wait an entire month only to get a small piece of action with minimal dialogue can feel draining. Dragon Ball at its core is an action driven with limited exposition, so readers often walk away from each chapter feeling like not much has happened. But as longtime fans of the series, I've grown used to that. I've learned to just appreciate Dragon Ball for what it is. A fun, straightforward series that thrives on battles and intensity rather than its complexity. Now, a place where time flows differently. This special dimension allowed him to train far beyond what was perceived in the normal universe. Because of this, when Tarambo granted the wish to make Granolah and Gas the strongest in the universe, Frieza wasn't even accounted for. He was effectively off the radar. In the past, it seemed unlikely that Frieza could ever keep up with Goku and Vegeta again. He appeared to have reached a natural limit, similar to what's called a plateau, a point in training where progress slows down dramatically. Like in video games where leveling up gets harder the higher your level becomes, Frieza's growth seemed destined to slow down. His rapid improvement during Resurrection F made sense because he started at a relatively low level. There was plenty of room to grow. He had never trained before and he already started off being 120 million, but after reaching a certain point, future gains would naturally be slower. That's why the 10-year time skip was such a clever way to justify his evolution. Under normal conditions, it would take him far longer to achieve this level of strength, but being in a different realm gave him the time and space he needed to train intensely and break through that plateau. Still, Frieza's sheer growth isn't the only terrifying thing. His new transformation, Black Frieza, is what really shakes things up. This form surpasses anything we've seen from him before, far beyond his golden form. In the world of Dragon Ball, two things are key to rapid power growth: a strong base form and a high multiplier, typically achieved through transformations or techniques. If a character meets both of these conditions, they become exponentially more powerful, and time after time, we've seen how critical a powerful base is. It's what makes a certain transformation so effective. With Frieza now possessing both, he has become a force to be reckoned with once more, and possibly the biggest threat the Z Fighters have ever faced. During the Goku Black arc, we've seen that Goku Black was already on par with Super Saiyan 2 Goku, a form that multiplies the user's base power by 100. That alone told us something alarming. Goku Black's base form was already 100 times stronger than Goku's base, making him incredibly dangerous right from the start. Now, imagine if Goku Black were to receive the same kind of multiplier that Goku uses, and he did. When Goku Black unlocked Super Saiyan Rose, a transformation comparable to Super Saiyan Blue, his power skyrocketed, and it made sense. Because his base was already stronger, when he accessed the powerful multiplier, his overall strength easily surpassed Goku and Vegeta. We've seen a brief scene in the anime where Blue Vegeta was unable to harm Goku Black in base form, meaning he trained his body to even surpass that of Super Saiyan Blue. Then when he went Rose on top of that, he had a multiplier similar and easily dominated them. Of course, Super Saiyan Rose isn't necessarily a 100 times multiplier, that number is just symbolic, but it stands as a transformation equal to Super Saiyan Blue, which we know is vastly beyond Super Saiyan 3. The power creep in Rose is real. The idea of base power affecting transformation potency could be seen again during the Tournament of Power. An exhausted base Goku was still able to hold his own against Super Saiyan 2 Caulifla, whose power was multiplied by 100 times. That comparison alone demonstrates the strength of base Goku. At first, Goku didn't even need a transformation to keep up with her. It wasn't until Caulifla's power began to grow rapidly during the fight that Goku had to start escalating too. One small but telling moment comes from Caulifla when she gets hit by a punch from Super Saiyan 2 Goku. She questions why his version of the form feels so much stronger than hers. That's because even when two Saiyans are in the same transformation, their strength isn't equal. The multiplier might be the same, but the base power feeding into it makes a huge difference. And that's exactly why Goku and Vegeta constantly train in their base forms. Strengthening the base directly amplifies the effectiveness of the transformation. It's the core of their power scaling. Understanding this is crucial for grasping just how overpowered Black Frieza really is. Now, let's talk about this evil god that Frieza has become. In the manga, he debuts a new transformation, Black Frieza. And yes, it absolutely grants a greater multiplier than his previous golden form. What's even more impressive is that Frieza has now mastered Golden Frieza. Back during Resurrection F, his stamina would drain rapidly in battle, allowing Goku and Vegeta to outlast him. But that weakness is no longer a factor. This mastery of his golden form allowed Frieza to evolve once more, tapping into an entirely new level of strength, Black Frieza. And yet, this transformation is just the surface of what makes him terrifying. What truly makes it horrifying is how much it multiplies an already massive base power. A transformation's effectiveness depends on two things: a strong base and a large large multiplier. In this case, Frieza now has both. That's why now he's such an overwhelming threat. Remember, Frieza had always had an unusually high base power. Back on Namek, without any training, his base strength reached 120 million. His transformations back then weren't actually multipliers. They were power limiters or suppressors. His final form was his natural unrestricted base form. That's a major contrast to Goku. While Goku was stronger than the average human, his raw base wasn't anything insane. What Goku did have, however, was high ki control, allowing him to enhance his strength and fight beyond his physical limits. Frieza, on the other hand, always possessed absurd raw strength, and now that he's trained seriously and found a new enormous transformation with a huge multiplier, that's why Black Frieza is arguably the most threatening version of him we've ever seen. That's truly the function of ki in Dragon Ball. It enhances the user's physical capabilities. The more ki a fighter powers up with, the faster, stronger, and more durable they become. Essentially, ki reinforces a character's base physical stats. This is especially important for characters like Goku, who rely on their ability to manipulate and multiply ki to bridge gaps in physical strength. Frieza, on the other hand, is a completely different beast. He's always possessed tremendous raw physical strength, even without heavily relying on ki. Despite his relatively small frame, every step he takes feels like a titan movement. His durability is just as extreme. Frieza has survived planet-level explosions while even severely injured. That alone speaks volumes about how naturally tough he is. Within the Dragon Ball universe, characters like Frieza and even Cell have such overwhelming base strength that even without powering up, they pose a massive threat. When these characters do amplify themselves with ki, they become absolute monsters. To stand a chance against foes like this, others must use a significant amount of ki to reinforce their bodies just to compete. That's why mastering ki control is such a crucial skill in Dragon Ball fights. Every fighter starts from a different baseline, just like in real life. People don't all have the same natural strength or endurance. Using ki gives fighters the ability to transcend physical limits, doing things that would be impossible under normal circumstances. For example, Frieza's base power of 120 million, according to the official Dragon Ball Z guidebook, is outdated now, especially after his insane 4 months of training in Resurrection F. That training alone significantly boosted his base form beyond what it was on Namek. However, even with that immense strength, it still wasn't enough to close the gap between himself and the years of dedicated training Goku and Vegeta went through, especially while Frieza was dead. That's why he needed a powerful multiplier, a transformation that could make up the difference. And his golden form did exactly that, bringing him to Super Saiyan Blue levels of power, but only for a short while. Why short? Because back then, his body couldn't handle the output of the transformation. It was like carrying weights far too heavy for your frame. His stamina rapidly drained, and it ultimately led to his downfall. The sheer energy output of Golden Frieza was too much for his unconditioned body to sustain, and burned through his stamina quick, until of course he trained. What makes his 10 years of training in a hyperbolic time chamber-like dimension so frightening is the result. The result is overwhelming. It's exactly why Black Frieza is such a threat. He's taken his already absurd foundation and layered it with a high-level multiplier. This is what made him the standout of the chapter. Frieza has once again reclaimed his position as the strongest in the universe, and rightfully so. While Cell is an artificial creation and Majin Buu is a magical entity made by a sorcerer, Frieza stands out as the most powerful organic being in the series, excluding figures like Beerus, of course, at least for now. Frieza's massive potential was always there, just untapped. In the past, no one ever challenged him enough to force growth, but after suffering multiple defeats in Dragon Ball Super, he finally realized that he couldn't stay stagnant. He refused to be left behind. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the Dragon Ball Super manga. Because while a lot of eyes are suddenly back on Dragon Ball thanks to the projects like Dragon Ball Super Beerus and things like Daima, the manga has quietly slipped into a strange limbo. It's been on hiatus and it hasn't officially returned. What makes that absence feel even louder is the fact that Dragon Ball as a franchise clearly hasn't slowed down. New animations are being announced, old arcs are being rebuilt, and yet the manga, the very thing that carried Super forward after the anime ended, is just absent. What makes this especially frustrating for fans is that even during major events like Genki Dama Matsuri, where Dragon Ball news did surface, the manga was nowhere to be found. We got confirmation of a new anime project, a new emphasis on Dragon Ball's future, but there was no update on Toyotaro's continuation, no hint of a new arc, reassurance that the manga is actively moving forward, or anything of that nature. For a series that once felt like the backbone of post-Tournament of Power Dragon Ball, that silence is impossible to ignore. And this isn't just about impatience. The Super manga occupies a very specific and important role in the franchise. After the anime ended, it became the primary vehicle for a new canonical material. Arcs like Moro and Granolah didn't just expand the story, they reframed how strong the cast actually is, explored concepts that the anime never touched, and pushed Dragon Ball into more experimental territory. For many fans, the manga wasn't a side project, it was Dragon Ball Super. That's why the lack of communication hit so hard. If Dragon Ball were completely dormant, the hiatus would make more sense, but it's not. Toei is actively revising Super. Daima is being positioned as a major narrative piece set directly after the Buu saga, and enhanced remakes are on the table. The franchise is clearly in a phase of reflection and restructuring. There's also that uncomfortable reality that the manga and anime have never been fully in sync. Super has always had two parallel continuities. And while that used to be seen as a strength, it may now be a complication. If Toei is serious about refining Super's legacy, tightening tone, cleaning up scaling, and rebuilding early arcs, then continuing the manga as is might actually make more contradictions than resolve them. In that context, the hiatus starts to feel less like neglect and more like a deliberate pause. Another factor is Toriyama's role in all of this. With Dragon Ball entering a more curated era where legacy projects are being handled carefully, it wouldn't be surprising if the decision makers want a clearer long-term roadmap before letting the manga move forward again. Once Toyotaro writes something, it becomes difficult to undo. If Super is being recontextualized from the ground up, then freezing the manga prevents the canon from splintering even further. Still, the silence is the problem. Fans aren't just waiting for chapters, they're waiting for clarity. Is the manga on a temporary break? Is it being retooled? Or will it return after these remake-style projects settle? Or has Dragon Ball Super quietly shifted away from the manga storytelling altogether? None of those questions have any real answers right now, and that uncertainty is what's fueling so much speculation. What makes this moment fascinating is that Dragon Ball feels more active than it has been in years, yet the manga feels more distant than ever. We're seeing the past revisited, while the future, at least on page, remains frozen. Whether that means the manga is being saved for a bigger relaunch or slowly phased out is still unclear though. The last real note the Dragon Ball Super manga left us on was Black Frieza, and that's important because that wasn't a small tease. Black Frieza wasn't just a new transformation, it was a hard reset of power hierarchy. In a single moment, Frieza re-established himself as the true endgame threat by casually one-shotting both Ultra Instinct Goku and Ultra Ego Vegeta. No cliffhanger dialogue or prolonged fight, just pure dominance. It was the kind of ending that screams, this is where the story goes next. And then it didn't. Instead of moving forward with that setup, the manga took a sharp turn backward and decided to retell the Dragon Ball Super superhero story. Not adapt it loosely or expand on it in real, meaningful ways, but essentially just redo it, beat for beat in manga form. And while that might sound reasonable on paper, in practice, it completely killed the momentum that Black Frieza reveal had built. What made this especially rough is that Superhero was already a self-contained story. The movie had its moment, Gohan had his spotlight, and Piccolo got his long overdue power-up. Rehashing that arc in the manga didn't push the narrative forward, it just simply stalled. It felt less like progression and more like hitting pause right when things were finally getting interesting. And for a lot of readers, that arc was a snooze for most of its runtime. The early focus on Goten and Trunks in high school didn't feel like a fresh direction, it felt like deja vu. And low-key, it came off like a minor retreat of the Great Saiyaman episodes from the Buu Saga. Lighthearted, goofy, and slice-of-life stuff that could be fun in small doses but completely be out of place once you've introduced the strongest version of Frieza we've literally ever seen. The difference is that in the Buu Saga, the Great Saiyaman stuff was clearly a breather before escalation. In Super, it felt like narrative whiplash. You go from gods, angels, multiverse threats, and Black Frieza to after-school antics and low-stakes comedy. For some fans, that tonal shift was charming, and for others, it felt like the story forgot what it was building toward. That's why the decision stings more in hindsight. The manga had finally carved out an identity separate from the anime. It was much darker, tighter knit, and power scale conscious. Black Frieza was the culmination of that approach. Choosing to pivot away from that momentum and then immediately go silent after finishing the superhero retelling makes the hiatus feel less like a natural break and more like a dropped thread. The last thing we got from the Dragon Ball Super manga that genuinely sparked excitement wasn't a plot twist. It was an all-out brawl at the very end. Goku versus Gohan, Gohan versus Broly, and then later Broly, Vegeta, Gohan, and even Goten and Trunks getting involved. It was pure chaos in the best possible way, like someone took a fan's wish list and animated it on paper, and had these characters clashing in ways we'd only ever talk about hypothetically. It felt unreal, almost like something out of a dream, and that's exactly why it hit so hard. That chapter captured the kind of energy fans have been craving for years. It wasn't about moving the story forward in a traditional sense, it was about the payoff. Seeing Gohan test his new strength against Goku directly. Watching Broly, still raw and unstable, collide with Gohan Beast's form. Vegeta asserting himself, and even Goten and Trunks being present made it feel like the entire next generation was finally being acknowledged in the same space as the gods and monsters of the series. For a brief moment, Dragon Ball felt alive in a way that was purely celebratory. Like it remembered why fans fell in love with power clashes in the first place. And what made it even more painful is how close it came to giving us even more. We were this close to seeing Orange Piccolo step into the chaos and square up with Goku as well. The setup was there, the positioning was there, and the vibe was there. And then the chapter just ended. No continuation, no escalation, just a cut to black, leaving fans stuck imagining what could have been instead of actually seeing it unfold. Now, to be fair, we technically did get more content after that. Chapter 103 gave us Clean God, but none of it carried the same electricity. None of it felt like it pushed the franchise forward in any meaningful way, it just simply existed. And don't get me wrong, it is great that we're getting a new anime. Anytime Dragon Ball comes back to the screen, it's a win on some level. Animation brings energy, visibility, and a sense of momentum that the franchise has been missing for quite a while. But there's an elephant in the room that nobody can really ignore. What happens when the anime inevitably catches up to the manga again? Because it's not hypothetical, we've already lived through it once. An anime revival without a progressing manga is basically just delaying the inevitable. You can only adapt what already exists for so long before you hit the same wall. No new arcs, no new villains, and no real forward motion. At best, you buy time, and at worst, you repeat history and end up stuck in limbo again, waiting for the story to decide where it actually wants to go. And that's why the manga continuing isn't optional, it's essential. What fans want more than anything right now is just more Dragon Ball content. People want to know what comes next, what exists beyond the current power ceiling, and what the end game is for characters like Goku, Vegeta, Gohan, Broly, and Frieza actually looks like. Black Frieza wasn't simply introduced so he could sit on a shelf forever, he was introduced to move the story forward into something new. The frustrating part is that the franchise has already proven it isn't afraid to experiment. Dragon Ball Daima is the perfect example of that. Daima showed that Toei and the Dragon Ball team are willing to do something fresh and weird. Something that doesn't strictly need to advance the main timeline to be worthwhile. It's a project that exists slightly off to the side, and I guess that's okay. Fans embraced it because it was different, creative, and unapologetically Dragon Ball. So the blueprint is already there. If they're willing to explore new territory with Daima outside of the core story, then there's no reason the main story can't take bold steps forward as well. The manga doesn't need to stay frozen just to protect the anime. It doesn't need to endlessly circle familiar ground, it just needs to leap. Dragon Ball has always been at its best when it commits to the next saga instead of hesitating at the edge of it. The jump from Pilaf to Piccolo, from Saiyans to Frieza, from Cell to Buu. Those weren't safe transitions, they were leaps of faith. And right now, that's exactly what Super needs. The next saga. Because anime or not, remake or not, Dragon Ball can't live forever in the space between arcs. Eventually, the story has to move forward, and when it does, that's when the franchise will truly feel alive again.